Boing.
Let's take a second look at creating figures. Please note that this tutorial was created on a pre-release version of Animation Pro 1.4. Your screens may look a little different. In this tutorial, I'm going to demonstrate the techniques that I've used to construct the figure of a girl. Later in the video, I'll also cover a few tips and tricks that I've used in the construction of other figures. Please note that this video will concentrate on the process of building a figure, rather than what all of the buttons, switches and menus in the figure editor do. So if you're unfamiliar with the functionality of the figure editor, please watch the Creating Figures tutorial first. So let's get started. Generally speaking, the best place to start when creating a figure of a person is with the torso. In this case, the girl's torso is divided into two parts, so that she can ultimately bend at the waist. So I'll begin by adding a line for the bottom part of her torso. Next, I'll substitute in the appropriate image. For the sake of this tutorial, I've already drawn all of the body parts using the Animation Pro image creator. These have all been saved under the User Images category for quick selection. Because I drew the line from bottom to top, the image appears to be upside down, so I'll open the item adjustment screen and rotate it 180 degrees. Now the items in a figure rotate about the handle that they are connected to. That is, the handle is effectively the pivot point. As you can see here, the handle at the top is not going to be in a good position for the upper body to rotate about. And if I were to try and move that handle, I would end up adjusting the orientation and size of the lower part of the body. The solution is to draw a new line to the required pivot point and then add another line to that for the upper torso. I can then use item adjustments again to rotate the upper torso and drag it such that the pivot point is in the correct spot. If I test the figure now, you can see that, whilst not perfect, the upper part of the torso can now bend about the desired pivot point. Next, I'd like to add a neck. Because I adjusted the upper torso, however, the handle is located far above where the neck should join, so it doesn't represent a viable pivot point for the neck. To address that, I'll again add another bridging line, add a line for the neck, and then replace it with the correct image. Finally, I'll make some item adjustments to the neck to rotate and position it so that the pivot point is in the right spot. Using the Z order dial, I'll also move it to the back. Now if I press the test button at the top of the screen, I can see that the neck pivots about the correct point on the upper torso. Next, I'm going to add the head. Once again, I'll create a bridging line to position the pivot point and another line that will be replaced by an image of the head. At this point, I'm hoping that you're starting to see a pattern emerge. Once again, I'll use item adjustments to rotate, scale, and move the head into position. And now we have a head that can nod. Now I like to create my heads blank, as that will allow me to substitute in different eyes, mouths, or hair whilst animating. I also like to make the hair white, such that it can be tinted to different colours. Speaking of hair, let's add some. Because the hair won't need to rotate about a pivot point, no bridging lines will be necessary. Next comes the girl's left eye. The eye needs to be located in the correct spot, so I'll need to add a bridging line. Repeating the pattern, I'll add another line for the eye and replace that with the correct image. Next, I'll add a mouth. Here I can drag the handle to resize the mouth without having to make an item adjustment. Now as you can see, there's a whole bunch of additional bridging lines in the figure. Please bear with me though, I'll show you how to hide those in a moment. First I'm going to add the girl's left arm. I'll do that by adding another bridging line so that I've got a new pivot point representing the girl's left shoulder. And once again, I'll add another line for the girl's upper arm, replace it with the correct image, and use item adjustments to move the image into place so that the pivot point is in the correct spot. If I test the figure now, you can see that the arm rotates correctly at the shoulder point. By now I'm really hoping that you're seeing a general pattern for adding body parts with the correct pivot points. But just in case, I'll repeat it 2 more times to add the lower part of the girl's arm and her hand. And there we have it, the beginning of a viable figure. But we've still got a lot of nasty looking black bridging lines in the figure, and some items, such as the girl's eye and mouth, shouldn't really move at all. So, to stop an item from moving, we need to make it static. So I'll do that for the eye and the mouth. I don't want the bridging lines to be movable whilst animating either, so I'll also make them static. And finally, I'll reduce the width of the bridging lines to effectively make them invisible. Now, when I test the figure, no unnecessary bridging lines or handles are shown. Finally, I'll fix up the remainder of the figure. At this point, things are looking okay, but the girl's head is a little too small for her body. I can quickly enlarge the head by dragging its handle. As a result, however, her hair, eye and mouth will be pulled out of position as they were all attached to the head's handle. So I'll quickly fix them by dragging the handles of the bridging lines and the items themselves. And now she looks much better proportioned. But wait, the lower part of her arm appears to be moving behind her body. To fix that, I'll use the Z order dial to bring her hand to the front, then her lower arm to the front, and then finally her upper arm to the front. One last test. Much better. When creating your figures, think about which items you may want to change whilst animating. If, for example, I had drawn the girl's eyes as part of the image of her head, then I'd have to substitute in a completely different head every time I wanted her eyes to change. But adding them as a separate item, I can easily substitute in other versions, even whilst animating. And a very talented animator once told me, it's all about the eyebrows. So let's take a look at a simple way of adding an eyebrow to this figure. First, I'll add a bridging line from the top of her head. Then I'll add another line for her eyebrow. Now in this case, I'm simply going to use a line for her eyebrow. You could, however, choose to insert an image. I will, however, make it a little thinner. Next, I'm going to make the eyebrow both bendable and stretchable. Finally, I'm going to make the bridging line stretchable and reduce its width to 0 to hide it. Now, because I made the bridging line stretchable, I can drag her eyebrow up and down quite easily. And because the eyebrow itself is both bendable and stretchable, I can easily adjust it to give the figure different expressions. And all of these adjustments can be made whilst animating, and tweened to produce smooth changes to a facial expression. Now, adding invisible stretchable bridging lines to a figure can be a really easy way to add items that can be moved freely about the figure. Let's take a look at another example. This time, I'm going to quickly add a line and replace it with a picture of a skull. If I zoom in on the skull, you can see that I have removed its eye sockets. Next, I'm going to add a couple of bridging lines from the top of the skull. Onto each of these, I'll add a couple of lines that I'll replace with an image of a pupil. Now, I will have no need to move the actual pupils whilst animating, so I'll make those items static. But when it comes to the bridging lines, I'll make those both stretchable and reduce their width to 0. Finally, I'll adjust the Z order of the pupils to place them behind the image of the skull. Now I have a couple of pupils that can be dragged around whilst animating to make the skeleton look in different directions or even go cross-eyed. I hope you found that as informative as I did. Thanks for watching.